You're watching the Movie Dawgs. We bark about the movies and nothing but the movies. Welcome to the Dawghouse. We take a bite out of the movies. Subscribe to the Movie Dawgs and become part of our film-loving community. Hit that subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell for updates. See you in the next review.
Please welcome your hosts, William Baxter and Joshua Church.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Movie Dawgs Show. Alright folks, it's hard to believe that it has been 25 years that the Lord of the Rings motion picture trilogy was brought to us on a silver platter in December of 2001. And I followed this trilogy all the way to the very end. My wife, she went with me each time because she was interested and wanted to see how it concluded. She's not a Star Wars fan, never was. So she wasn't really there for the Star Wars prequel trilogy, which had just recently, I think by then episode 2 had been out. And episode 3 was just still quite a bit away. So Peter Jackson had this great idea, he wanted to do King Kong, but he couldn't do it. So he decided, well, let's do Lord of the Rings. Originally, they were going to do just the first two. And they went and approached Miramax, who was then owned and run by the Weinstein brothers. And, you know, it was a pretty hard sell, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember all the entire history about the making of this film. There's documentaries about that and for that to go through. But eventually the Weinsteins knew that they weren't going to be able to make this in the scope. So they allowed Jackson to shop it around, and then went to New Line Cinema. And Robert Shaw, who was still in charge of New Line Cinema, even though it was, at the time, I still believe it was still owned by Turner solely before the Time Warner Turner buyouts. But by then, I think by the time the movies got made, it was under the AOL Time Warner banner. But they, Robert Shaw was like, well, isn't this a trilogy? Why don't we just make it a trilogy? So they ran ahead and they decided they're going to do all three of them. Now, of course, the best way to do this, and this still at this time was kind of unprecedented at the time, to do all three trilogies simultaneously. Now, in the past, the Salkinds did it with the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, and they did it with Superman and Superman 2. Of course, Back to the Future 2 and 3 were filmed at the same time. I know there had been other productions to do this, but for this type of scale, you had to have the resources, and Peter Jackson basically did it all under his umbrella. They created the technology, they developed the technology, they kept it, and there was only one place he felt like they can do this was in New Zealand. So they basically turned New Zealand into Middle Earth, and they built the Shire. They built the sets, and the technology, which some people even back then were kind of wary about CGI, the way they are with AI technology when it comes to computer graphics and using it for movies. People were a little worried and think about it, but they were able to really knock it out. I can remember one year before, in 2000, Christmas of 2000, there was a channel called E! Entertainment Network, and when they started, they were more or less known to show movie trailers. That was its big catch. And that's where we'd see a lot of our movie trailers. Back then, we didn't have YouTube. It was either that or the news magazines, ET or Extra or Access Hollywood. But they showed, they even had a premiere in prime time on their channel for this what I call now, well, what it was called now, for the super teaser or super trailer. And I can remember, you see the ring kind of floating in the air and it's catching on fire, and you see the elf language, in the interior of the ring, and of course the one ring to rule them all, one ring to bind them. That speech, and of course a little hand catches it, and then the hand opens up, and you see all these images that are actually images from all three films. And it was so captivating. It really caught me. I was never really always the biggest into swords and sorcery type of films, but I was always into a good sword fight, which is why I was always a fan of Highlander. But I found myself, and I had read the books as a kid. I mean, and I watched the animated movies, but I wasn't too well thought into or knowledgeable of all of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits. And I just found myself captivated by this trailer. And then by the end of the trailer, it shows, the Fellowship walking over that little ridge, and it says Fellowship of the Ring, Christmas 2001. The Two Towers, Christmas 2002. And then the Return of the King, you see Aragon walking over, Christmas 2003. It was set in stone. We knew these were coming, and we were getting these. We were getting the whole trilogy. That was one of the best trailers I think ever made to hype up a film. It done 1 year, probably not. It had been done before like that, with a trailer. It came out like a year before. Not very often. Nowadays, it's like, trailers have got trailers to a trailer nowadays. But I was so immersed in that. And that trailer still to this day still gives me any trailer. There's no need for any other. I didn't care anything about the other trailers to the films. When they were coming out, they had their own trailers, of course, individual 3 trailers. Never watched them. I don't think I've to this day watched them. I've only watched this trailer. Matter of fact, I just watched it several times while I used it for the advertising of this episode. But I just remember going to these films and just I was hooked. I wanted to see finally something in my generation, towards the end of my generation, because I'm the last part of Generation X, and we had these books through our whole lives and reading them and the animated movies, but we were finally getting Lord of the Rings in a live action movie, a movie that was told can never be filmed, and Peter Jackson did it, and it won all these Academy Awards, including the last film, won a record-setting Academy Awards, with Best Picture, and it was just, one of the best build-ups ever, and, of course, Kevin Smith gave us his rendition, his thoughts, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and you can see that in Crooks too, which I still think is one of the funniest things in that movie. But, and I'm compelled, I'm conflicted, I'm a Star Wars fan and I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, so, but I can't, there's so much about this. It's just so much to it, and but I can't just say it alone. I'm going to be handing this off to Josh here soon, in case he went to go to the 25th anniversary re-showings. And I do have to say, though, folks, I don't know if it was the special editions that he went to watch. There is a special edition. There's 4 hours of this. There's a lot that Peter Jackson filmed for these films. But there was the I highly recommend, if you want to watch the theatrical ones, yes. But if you want the full extent visual and story and the big hefty fat burger that you want to eat, or that big thick steak, check out the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings trilogies. You will not be, trust me, you will not be disappointed. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Joshua Church. So I'll talk to you guys here towards the end of this episode.
Hey everybody, so this is Josh with the Movie Dawgs Show, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite movies. Well, actually let me rephrase that. My all-time favorite trilogy, and that is Lord of the Rings. So Lord of the Rings just released Fathom Events, one-time only deal for all 3 films extended, playing, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, for the 25th anniversary. Now, the thing is with Lord of the Rings, I guess I have a very long history and reason for loving these films. It's kind of a personal trilogy for me. Now, growing up, I had only ever seen, snippets of the Rankin and Bass animated Lord of the Rings. I knew of the novels, but had never actually read them. And I had heard about it, that they were working on it, right whenever I was joining the military. So at that time, you start seeing all the stuff about the effects and how they had the army effects where they would show all the little monsters and be able to reproduce the orcs and actually be able to do the battles the way that they would want to. It was kind of a game-changing thing at the time. And I remember looking into it because I'm, a student of film, and I always like, knowing the behind the scenes of how they put this stuff together, and it's just fascinating and interesting to me. So I was definitely plugged in on the making of the film. But whenever I joined the military, my life obviously got hectic. When the Fellowship came out, I think trying to nail down the year, but I think it's right around either the beginning of the war, the response to 9/11, or somewhere around there. And it's hard for me to really nail it down, but I do remember seeing the first film in a Japanese movie theater when I lived in Japan at the Virgin Theater in Yamato. And I saw it with Japanese subtitles, which is a different experience. But I remember watching the movie, and it kind of, that movie bonded me to the moment that I was in. And the fact that the Hobbit's journey wasn't too far off from my own, of just wanting to help, wanting to be somebody who helped and was a part of a bigger thing than me, doing what's asked of you and expected of you, and doing your duty, and knowing what that was going to cost and the journey that he was about to go on. Now, as you go into Two Towers, I remember Two Towers came out during the meat of my time, during the war, and it has the least amount of action sequences, but feels like the beginning of the war in that story, and so it really mirrored what I was going through, and it's weird because I can't remember to show how chaotic my life was at that time. I don't remember where I saw it in the theater. I know I did, but I can't remember if I saw it on the boat, on a projector, or if I saw it on a bootleg DVD, or if I saw it whenever we got back. I can't remember. And honestly, that's emblematic of a lot of my time during the war. There's a lot of blank spots, and just trauma. But yeah, Two Towers further cemented the weight of what war was and why people fight, and what they hope the future will be. Will you have a shining light to defeat the darkness? And I remember Sam's speech moving me to tears the first time I heard it, because I knew what it meant, and why it meant so much to me at that time. The keep going and persevere, and there's good in this world, it's worth fighting for, and that just stuck to me. And still to this day, anytime I need a pick-me-up, an emotional reboot, I watch The Lord of the Rings to kind of put me back in a hopeful, we can fight this kind of, mode. But I do remember around that time, right before Two Towers came out, I got the novels and I read them on the ship multiple times and dove deep. I mean, I read the Silmarillion, I read The Hobbit, I read the appendices in Return of the King. I read everything, and I was deep into Lord of the Rings. I bought replica swords. I had, I think my girlfriend at the time, I bought her Arwen's necklace. I for years I wore Aragorn's Ring of Barahir. So I was, it held on to me. The Lord of the Rings grabbed me by the neck and said, you're mine now. And so I was fully in. Now, by the time the war was wrapping up, for us anyway, by this point it had become a war that was mostly for the occupying army and Marines. And so we, at that point, kind of pulled back more, but we were still involved. We'd had other deployments, but at least my squadron did when I got out. But we transitioned to the Super Hornets. We had a little bit of a break when we went to California, and that was my last 6 months in the Navy. The war was over for me. And I remember I was very emotional. I wanted out. I just wanted out, and I couldn't handle it anymore. And I was in a dark place. This was the closest I came to contemplating suicide. Like I was just not in a great spot during this time of my life. And Lord of the Rings, it was like when Return of the King came out, it was in California. I saw it at a theater there, and I just remember. I just remember it hitting me really strongly. And I saw it again when I got home, and the Hobbit's journey, and both, really, literally everybody, Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin, their journey from happy hobbits in the Shire to war heroes and damaged, men coming back home after war and trying to reintegrate into society. It hit me. Like, as much as I had hoped, you'd love to be like Aragorn and be a warrior badass and, be somebody like Gimli or Legolas, fighting. And I realized very quickly, no, I'm much more a Sam or a Frodo. Just trying to do what you can and barely getting by and hoping, that you can do something. And that movie, God, I cried so hard. I think I saw that movie 6 times in the theater. But that scene at the end, and I've told Sean Astin this, and I've told Elijah Wood this when I've met them. The scene at the end where the 4 hobbits come back home, they're back in their pub, and they're sitting there quietly. Everybody else is having a great time around them, and they just solemnly look at each other, and they raise their glasses, and they clink them, and they kind of put it to bed. But it's like in that moment, they realize, like, it's like Frodo says, why can't you go back? And it's like you realize there is no going back. You're not the same. Everything has changed, and that the person you were is gone, and you're not you anymore. And the other hobbits are able to reintegrate and get back to normal, so to speak. But they're all obviously grown and different, but they can get back to their lives. Frodo is the one who can. And that also hit me, and I don't know, just like those movies during that time, they helped pull me out of that dark place and reminded me, that life was worth living and that things could get better. And so Lord of the Rings has just always been that series of movies for me. And I watched them pretty much once a year. And so when the opportunity came to go to Regal and watch them with my kid, who had never seen them on the big screen, but also loved them, I jumped at it. So I, of course, had to do it. Each film, seeing it again, was just amazing. It's because, like, you get so used to seeing it on your TV. And when you see it on big screen, on proper celluloid, on the big theater, you do notice, like, stuff that you go, wow, I didn't realize in that shot that you can see that stuntman. I didn't realize in that shot that you could see the effect, falling apart a bit. And so I started catching stuff like that, which was cool. And there was just also the realization that some of the extended scenes, all of the extended scenes I'd never seen on the big screen. So it was really cool, and it was cool being there with my son, even though he passed out in fellowship. But it was late at night. It started at 7, so we were there pretty late. But I got to see, Two Towers, and I got to see Return of the King, and it was cool sitting in the theater and talking to young people who were like, oh, I've never seen it on the big screen. It reminded me of seeing Star Wars with my dad, and seeing it with older people who had seen it when they come out, and me thinking, oh, it's just so cool. I get to see Star Wars on the big screen, and I've never seen it. And so it was kind of a weird, welcome to old age moment where you just realize you're no longer that kid anymore. But yeah, it was just a very emotional, awesome moment. The only thing that sucks about the whole experience was they had a little introduction by Peter Jackson at the beginning of each movie. And Peter is very long-winded, becoming very much an old man, where he stumbles and talks around himself and just like keeps the story going for a little longer than it really needs to, and giving you details of stuff that you really don't need, but he's just going to tell it to you. And for a person like me who's a huge fan, I loved it. I was like, oh, I'm totally plugged in. I'm listening to Peter. The only thing that sucks is, of course, you got people who aren't huge fans that just want to see it on the screen. They're in the back just going, shut up, get it over with. What the heck? This guy won't quit. And you're like, you watch your mouth, son. This man's a legend. Like, who the hell you think you are? So it's a little bit of a struggle bus dealing with that. But and I do wish that the Epic Theater that I saw it in would have put it on a bigger screen and not their smallest screen. But still, it did not diminish any of the power of that film. And that film, to me, well, all three of those films, we keep calling it one film, even though it's three. It technically is one story in my mind and was shot all at once. So, but those films, I mean, they're one of the last, movies that were made in a classic fashion. I mean, there is CGI in it, but because of their use of the bigatures and the real props and real places and all of that, those movies hold up as what they were and what they were meant to be. And it's hard watching modern movies and looking back on a movie like this and just going, this is how it's done, this is how it's done. And if anything, it was a positive, show of like how you make something so epic and such a large novel or story and adapt that. And for one, it's a masterclass in adaptation. Because even though, as much as people say, oh, they got rid of, they got rid of different characters in the movie, and the one, God, blanking out his name now, but I can't believe, I hate that I can't remember it right now, but yeah, but just a whole bunch of stuff that was cut out. A lot of characters out of Return of the King that weren't there. Story bits that weren't in the first one and the second one. There's a whole bunch, that's in the novels, that's not in the actual movies. But I thought, as far as adaptation, it's one of the best adaptations to get the core of the story right. It didn't have the Scouring of the Shire, but it's fine. But yeah, I don't know. It was great, and I enjoyed it. And definitely it gets top marks for me as far as being, one of the better re-releases that I saw. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that. And I appreciate you listening to my long-winded, Lord of the Rings-sized quick bites here. But I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks very much. And just remember, this world is worth fighting for. So keep on doing that, especially now. Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, everyone. I want to thank Josh for sharing his stories and reminiscing about his love for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Again, folks, you've got to check it out if you haven't seen it, especially the extended editions. So, all right, folks. Well, that's all the time I got. Again, thanks, Josh, again. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't yet. Again, let's get us all the way up to 1,000 subscribers this year. We're getting close. So, once again, folks, thanks for watching, and please keep on watching, because one ring rules them all.
Hey, like and subscribe. Be sure to check out more of the content on the Movie Dawgs channel. All the reviews and cool remarks and cool guests like me, Josh Church, the owner of River Monster Comics. We are in Denellen, Florida, so if you're ever in the area, come by and check out the shop. Get some cool nerd stuff, comics, pops, toys, whatever. And swing by and just have some cool conversations about movies and all things pop culture. We appreciate you. See you soon.